Hello, everybody. My name is Ulrich. I work for Brainbot, and today I'm going to talk to you about Shutter Network, which is a system for combating front-running and malicious MEV on Ethereum. And as a bonus, we will also introduce some new discovery we've recently made in cooperation with Claros, that Shutter can also be used as an improvement to commit reveal UX. So as a very brief overview of the content of the talk, first a refresher on what MEV is, then an overview of what Shutter is, how it works, and what currently is usable on-chain and what the future will bring in the next coming month. So currently we do have a solution that is ready to be deployed on main chain with existing dApps that requires some adjustment to the dApps smart contracts and also has some limitations. For example, it's not compatible with DeFi composability, which may or may not be a downside for some applications. We are working on other application domains that will solve that problem in the future. Watch out for announcements from our side in the future there. And also, in parallel, we're working on a cooperation with Claros. They are an on-chain court arbitration system, and they currently face some UX challenges due to the commit reveal scheme they're using, which I will go into more detail later. And this cooperation, there we discovered that Shutter is a nice improvement on that UX. So what is front-running in MEV? You probably already all know that, but let's just very quickly cover it. MEV is for minor or maximal extractable value, and basically any minor block producer, sequencer that has access to transactions before they are included in some form of block or whatever, has the opportunity to gain value by injecting their own transactions, censoring transactions, reordering them, or also more subtly also changing timestamps, parent blocks, and thereby, for example, changing the block hash and influencing randomness as an example. So front-running, probably everybody knows this, but very quickly, some user wants to submit a transaction to a DeFi DEX. The miner sees that the price is moving because of this transaction, so he can submit one transaction before the users and one afterwards to extract some value that reduces the user's gains, and thereby is considered malicious. So the user receives the worst price, which is, of course, not in the user's interest. So what solutions and workarounds currently exist? At the moment, the application layer has to take care of not being susceptible to front-running. For example, if you don't rely on exact timestamps or don't use block hashes for randomness, you can use commit reveal schemes, which we will get to later. There are also batching mechanisms in other systems. Those are all necessary at the moment, but put all the burden of preventing front-running onto the application developer and also leads to duplication of effort in a lot of systems, so it's not optimal. Another option is to democratize the extraction. That is, for example, what Flashbots is doing with the MEV geth. That is slightly better because it distributes the value extracted onto many users of the system, but is also, in our opinion, not what we should aim for. So another option is an MEV-resistant base layer, where the transaction execution already is resistant or even completely immune to front-running. That could either be a new L1, L2, or a middleware, somewhere in between. And that is what we basically call the various application domains. So, as mentioned, either it could be a new L1 or L2 chain, You could also use some centralized institution that just promises to not front run you, but that's obviously not desirable in a decentralized system. And then you have the current smart contract system on Ethereum, which is where Shutter comes in. So what is Shutter? It is a way to prevent front running by using encrypted transaction and distributed threshold encryption. So in the current on-chain system that we have finalized, users submit encrypted transaction. They are collected into what we are calling a batch, which is covers a number of Ethereum blocks, just for efficiency reasons, so we don't have to do all the encryption back and forth for every Ethereum block. And every one of these batches is encrypted with their own key. So the miners don't know what the transactions actually contain until the key is revealed after the batch is finalized. And that continues just for batches continuously. So how do you encrypt this, and where do the keys come from? So one option would be for the users to pick a key themselves, which on the first look sounds like a good idea, but actually it's not, because the user would gain the free option by that, which means he could simply submit two transactions, for example, one betting on rising price, one betting on falling prices, and then just reveal the one that turns out to be advantageous for him. So that would break many assumptions of existing DeFi systems, so we can't do that. Then we could use a trusted third party to generate the keys. That is, of course, not desirable in a trustless and decentralized system, so that's out too. And then the solution is to use a committee, basically what we do in all kinds of layers of those systems. In Shutter we call those the keepers, and as long as there is an honest majority, the system will work. So it can tolerate a number of malicious users, also offline participants, and they perform distributed key generation via threshold encryption, basically. So how does on-chain Shutter work then? For every batch, the keepers generate a new key pair. The users use the public key to encrypt their transactions, send them to a so-called batcher contract. After the batch is filled up, or the time of the batch is over, the keepers decrypt the transactions, send them to the executor contract, which then interacts with the target contract on chain. And that is also already the downside of the system in its current form. We require that the contracts that are used with Shutter are modified to only accept transactions, or let's say in most cases, only accept transactions from Shutter and not from regular users, because then you would be open to front running and MEV again. And this in turn also breaks composability, which is for most applications a problem. As we will see soon, there are some that still work with that scheme. And it also slightly increases latency, but that may or may not be a problem depending on your application. So we are currently working on the next phase of Shutter that will solve many or maybe even all of those problems. We are not yet ready to announce exactly what that is, but watch for an announcement in the near future. And now we come to a use case that we recently discovered while in talks with Kleros. So commit reveal is a way to combat front running, as we've already mentioned. And in some sense, Shutter itself is a commit reveal system that does automatic reveal. So quickly, summary, what is commit reveal? They are very useful for votings, blind auctions, but they have downsides. The UX is not great. There are additional transaction costs, and users may not reveal because they just forget or don't want to spend the extra money for the second transaction. So in a voting example, users submit a commit, which is just a salted hash of their actual vote. And after the voting period is done, they will submit their actual vote as a reveal. And that has the mentioned problems of UX that users have to remember to do a second transaction days or weeks later, depending on the specific system. And also two on-chain or on-native chain, whichever chain that is, transactions are required. So the shutter commit reveal solution solves those by the users simultaneously sending the traditional commit on-chain and also submitting an encrypted reveal to Shutter. And then at that point they're done, and everything else will be handled by Shutter. So once the reveal period, the vote period is over, the keepers will decrypt the user's transactions and submit them as a batch to the voting contract. And in voting applications, composability is usually not a big issue. So for that, the current system is very usable. So now you might say we still have 2 transactions per user plus 1 reveal transaction, so how is that better? And we still also have fees for the keepers. And also the batch reveal may need changes to the target contract, but it's not a big deal in our opinion. So the solution is Shutter can be run on an L2 or sidechain, because in this specific application, we don't actually need direct smart contract interaction between the executor contract and the target contractor chain. So therefore, the submission of the encrypted votes can be very cheap, for example, if run on XDAI. And the reveal transaction is amortized across all voters, because there's only one needed, and the bigger the number of voters, the cheaper it gets, of course. Also, the keeper fees are expected to be relatively low because it will be mainly fixed operating costs and not, or rather the per transaction additional cost the keepers are incurring is really low because they're not doing that much. They're just generating keys mainly. So one partnership we are currently in the early stages of is, as I mentioned, with Kleros. They are a court arbitration system on-chain, where it's not, for cases where it's not possible to have like a automatic machine decision if something is the way it should be or not. So classic cases of contract disputes, stuff like that. In their system, the jurors are rewarded for voting with the majority, since they can't, it's a system to decide who's right, so there can't be an a priori decision which is the right vote. So this leads to a conflict of interest for the jurors because they might just want to vote with the majority to gain the reward. And this is why Kleros usually intends to use a commit reveal system. I think they at the moment don't necessarily do because of transaction costs and UX problems. Yeah, but it's a problem if the jurors just do this to gain profit and not to actually vote and solve the case. So the next version is going to be on some rollup, and there is where we will, or we are looking to implementing Shutter in some way, as I described before, to solve the commit reveal scheme as optimized UX, basically. Yeah, that's already it. Time is almost over. That's my name. You can find me on social media and GitHub and stuff under that handle. And Shutter Network is looking for projects and partnerships, both in the current implementation we have and also for future collaborations, also with our upcoming improved version. And Brainboard is always looking for great people to work with us. So if you're interested, please give it a look. Thank you.